It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today, well, it's the Thursday club, but we're releasing it on Friday because it's the summer and we've lost all track of days. I'm joined once again by a newly married Mr. Jack Collins.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Very good. How are you? How's married life?
I'm very good. Yeah, I'm in newly marital bliss. It's wonderful. Yeah, I'm having a great time. Although it feels like it's similar to, I suppose, coming back from like a festival, I think, in terms of like, you're like, that happened and now it's like the real world is back. And you just like suddenly, I'm sat at the desk recording again. You're like, oh, cool. It's like nothing's changed. And yet everything has.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, I think it's actually been quite nice, but it's also quite strange, like sitting down and be like, oh, okay, we're just back to it. On Sunday night, I sat down and watched the Mexico versus US game in the Gold Cup. It was the first full game of football I'd watched in like 2 weeks, which is very weird for me. And I like sat down and was like, oh, right, we're just back to it. Like that's it. Like get back on the grindstone. So yeah, it's been lovely and I've had a wonderful time, but it also does feel a little bit like a dream in many ways.
Yeah, well, it's lovely to have you back. What a wedding.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. We gave it a good go. Is probably how I'd put it.
What were your highlights of it? I mean, the day on the Saturday was just like something I'd never experienced before.
I don't think I've ever experienced that heat before. 36 degrees in a three-piece. I'm not cut out for the heat. Like it's not my scene. It's not my style. So
you braved it so well, though. I think is important to say. Like everyone, so many. I mean, jackets, ties, shirts unbuttoned amongst all the guests, but I was admiring that you saw it through.
Well, I think at the first kind of time I came into the reception, I was like, I'm going to take my jacket off now. I put it down and someone was like, oh, can we have you for a picture? I was like, better put that back on. And after about 5 times, I was like, I'm just going to leave it on. It's more effort and more heat taking it off and putting it on again than it is doing anything else. So, it was lots of fun. I loved every single minute of it. It was such a brilliant couple of days. But personal highlights: Lucy walking into Zadok the priest. Someone turning around and be like, have you done the Champions League yet?
I genuinely, I was really about to, I so badly wanted to go, the champions from the stalls, but I thought your family might think that's inappropriate.
Yeah, maybe slightly. But it was that was a pretty special moment, coming into dinner and having Carnival de Paris playing. Although I did myself on football trivia. Obviously, I don't follow England, so I forgot that Carnival de Paris is used as a big thing in England away, and then so suddenly we're walking around and one of the tables near me and my uni friends, got to the end, and I was like, oh no,
England.
I was like, oh no, I completely done. I think it's because everyone uses that song, right? Like there is a kind of element of every club finding a way to use that song in some way or another that I'd completely forgotten it was a thing. So I was like, oh no, I've done myself here. But that was pretty special. And I loved giving a 25-minute speech to a captive audience. That was a personal highlight.
I mean, it was an amazing speech. It was the kind of speech that, like, I no way would get away with that. I feel like if I started to say to Caroline that, I'll love you in this universe and the next, I feel like I wouldn't get away with it. But coming out of your poetic kind of mind, it just worked and it captivated the audience.
Thank you.
This is meant as a compliment.
Thank you. No, it was lots of fun. I enjoyed giving it, and also like, when are you going to give that kind of speech where like everyone's like, you kind of, not only are they captive, but also there is a kind of genuine sense of goodwill about it as well. So I don't think you get away with that kind of length of speech. Thank God I cut it, by the way. It was 24 minutes 50. You timed it, right?
Yeah.
And that was the draft that had been cut in half. Like the original speech was about 6,000 words, which would have taken a full-on hour. So I'm really glad that we got it down to 25 minutes.
There were some Fulham mentions in the speech.
Yes.
Mark Fotheringham got a mention.
Yes. Yeah. I was kind of professing my loyalty to Lucy and basically like, look, if I will follow Fulham when Mark Fotheringham and Jamie O'Hara are our midfield, then you have nothing to worry about in terms of loyalty, right? Like I'm going to stick with you. It's kind of second nature to me. So that was a good bit. Tom put it in his best man speech as well. So that was nice. He was like, your other great love, so we've been dragging you up and down the country for the next 30 years. So it was, Fulham got a fair bit. Also, my table was Craven Cottage. All of our tables were named after different stadiums that Lucy and I have either been to together or that mean something to us. And table 1 was very much Craven Cottage. So
I love that table 1 was Craven Cottage. I was worried that you'd like put it as the Villa Marine and
betray your very much at the back. And you were Sam Amez?
I was at Sam Amez, which is a cool table to be at. Obviously, the home of Athletic Club. So I enjoyed being on that table. I also enjoyed winding up your aunt that supports Brentford.
Well, so this was a fun one. I did think about this long and hard because I was like, oh well, London Irish have been my rugby team for forever, really. And I was like, how do I get them in? But so I actually, when I got the table designs made, I redesigned the GTEC and put it in as the London Irish Stadium. And like even the badge on the side of the thing was the London Irish badge rather than the Brentford one. The seats were green rather than their multicoloured array. And then I put the table name as London Irish Stadium. So, we got the digs in as well.
And placed your aunt supports Brentford on there.
And placed the two Brentford fans on that table. So that was good. But it was payback because I was put at a wedding from a Brentford fan in Stockholm in February, I think. And they put me on a table that was called Fulham Get Battered. And I was like...
Oh, you didn't mention that.
So it was like, okay, right, I see what you're doing here, Pippi. And so that got put there. And I was actually next to, one of the staff that worked for Fulham as well on the table. And I was like, this is a joke. And he was like, I think we should take it as an instruction.
Fulham get battered.
So I was like, okay, cool, we will. So that's how we got our way around that one.
Yeah, well, we also got our own comeback by getting to sing that to them twice last season. So wonderful. Well, look, it was an amazing wedding, and congratulations.
Thank you.
To you and to Lucy, and loved the Portuguese flavour of it as well. Just throughout, it was.
That was just for Marco Silva, really.
Yes,
it was nothing to do with Lucy's Portuguese roots, and actually just completely as a tribute to Marco Silva. And
I meant to say that, like you had a Portuguese priest.
Yes.
And I couldn't get over the whole time. I was like, if Marco Silva were a priest, I think he'd be a bit like this guy.
I think that's probably fair enough. He was quite a stoic dude.
Yeah.
Quite calm.
But he occasionally would crack like a small joke, but like with a very serious face on. He kind of even made a little joke about football in there. He was just like, love is a bit like supporting our football teams. Haha. And then carried on. And I was like, it's kind of Marco Silva's humour. Just like, yeah, we can have a little bit of fun, but not too much.
Not too much fun. This is a sensible situation.
Yeah, let's get down to business. This is a serious day.
I'm glad you didn't make too many jokes because the service was about an hour and a quarter anyway. So thankfully the church was cooler than outside.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, you've missed so much in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I hear it's been absolutely, nerve shattering in terms of the news that's come out.
It's been really hard to keep up with the Fulham news in the last 2 weeks, as we've done precisely nothing, which is obviously a lot of what Jack and Joe discussed on the podcast early this week. So we're not going to go over the same ground that Jack and Joe went over, because they basically did react to the non-news that has been going on. I mean, though, I thought it was really interesting, Jack and Joe's takes. And honestly, if you haven't listened to Jack and Joe's show yet, make sure you do, because I think that both of their takes, and, obviously Jack works for the club and he's got to kind of keep, well, he doesn't work for the club, he's a journalist. Working with the club, but he's got to keep an air of professionalism. But you could hear the frustration of both of them throughout the podcast, really, at Fulham once again getting to kind of mid-July with almost nothing happening. We're the last team in the Premier League, well, to make a signing. We haven't made a signing. We're the only ones in the Premier League. There is this school of thought, though, that Fulham have been here before. This is not new, that Fulham take so long to make signings. So part of me feels like, obviously, yes, would I have liked us to make several signings so that they were here for pre-season when it starts next week? Yes. But there is also an element of, we've been here before and we've been mostly fine for the last few years.
Yes, and that's fine if we want to be mostly fine again, right? But how often over the course of the season do we bemoan the fact that Emil Smith-Rowe didn't get a full pre-season with Marco Silva, and thus it might be another year before we see the best of him? Are we not learning any lessons from these things? And look, there are exceptions and there are differences, when you come into these different things. And it doesn't mean that every player is going to need a year to get up to speed. And it doesn't mean that, every signing is going to take a while to fit in and bed in.
And no club gets all their transfer business done before pre-season.
Nobody does. But there is a level of it being surely we were aware of what we were going to need. We were safe in January? That was the moment you're like, okay, we're not going to get relegated this year. There's nowhere near we're going to get dragged into it. To be honest, it might have been earlier than that. So when you're looking at that, you're surely thinking, and I know that the market is reactive, and I know it's been a bit strange this summer because obviously that kind of mini market opening before the Club World Cup that really only felt like it applied to teams in that tournament. But equally, you look at the business that other teams are doing, and look, I do think it's important to note that Fulham's squad is relatively stable. right? This isn't going to be a massive summer of overhaul and outs and ins and all of those things. I would imagine we need to make a couple of signings, sort of 4 or 5 probably, but most of them are squad players and potentially kind of upgrading the depth as opposed to needing to completely overhaul the first team. So there is that to consider. We're watching Burnley and Sunderland make loads of signings, for example, and Leeds United. Obviously, they need those big overhauls. We've seen the step from Championship to Premier League all the time, and there have been a lot of outgoings elsewhere as well, which we haven't really seen at Fulham. So it's worth bearing in mind that in terms of what we're doing, there should be a level of kind of, okay, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're not trying to completely and utterly scrap what's just been happening and move into something else. We're trying to augment rather than kind of have a full revolution. But I do still think that you get those players in early, you make those differences, and you have them ready to hit the ground running when it comes to that opening day, especially considering our opening sour fixtures is pretty difficult, right? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. You want your team to be in there hitting the ground running. You want to be there potentially taking advantage in the third game that Chelsea have had this kind of weird pre-season where they're going to do the Club World Cup, and they're obviously in the final of that tournament, and then they're going to have a couple of weeks off, one game and straight into the Premier League season. Can you take advantage of that? These are opportunities, and look, it might not come to pass. I'm not sitting here saying that Fulham are definitely going to win that game at Stamford Bridge, third game of the season. What I'm saying is that there is a potential opportunity there if they don't click into gear straight away, especially with a number of new players, that that you potentially can, take advantage of. And we just don't feel like we're learning any of the lessons from years gone by and from yesteryear that we are going to get to that point and be completely ready for the new season.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do before the end of part 1 is actually go through Fulham's squad and look at what positions exactly that we think Fulham need. You might have a few transfer suggestions up your sleeve. I'm not necessarily going to have suggestions like you will, but there might be a few people that come to mind. But we're going to go through position by position, and we haven't corroborated on this.
No.
So we might have slightly different opinions of exactly what we need in certain positions. And I guess the other thing to say is we don't exactly know what formation we're going for. I'm going to assume that loosely we're going to be on some sort of 4-2-3-1. Yeah. In that mold, we need a number 10. We're probably going to have 2 holding midfielders. It's probably going to be a back 4. There's an argument to say that maybe this is the season that Marco fully gets behind the back 5. Personally, I don't see that.
I don't think so. He's never really done that in his career. Will we see bits of it throughout the season? Yeah, I think so. Will we see it as his standard formation, starting lineup at their first day at Brighton? Yeah. I'd be shocked.
Okay. And I guess we're looking at each position of whether we are potentially going to lose a player there, whether we need to upgrade a player there, and whether we need to find new depth there, or actually new maybe first team starters. Mm-hmm. So, obvious. Goalkeeper.
Yeah.
But no, Stephen Bender's gone. So, is it a case that we're just looking for a number 2 here?
Yeah.
Or, controversially,
Are you looking for someone to challenge?
Are you looking for someone or an upgrade? Are there upgrades available on Bernd Leno? I'm not saying that we should. I'm just putting it out there that he's not flawless.
No, but I think that Fulham are pretty comfortable in terms of where they are with Bernd Leno. I think we are looking for a number 2. And what we've seen from Fulham before in this market is we don't tend to go and spend loads of money, right? This is a market which we look at and think, okay, where do we come in? And there's been links to Matty Ryan, who's a free agent. I'd be surprised if we don't pick up a free agent or someone on kind of very, very low fee here. So I think Matty Ryan's a good bet. The other one there's Angus Gunn, the former Norwich City keeper. Probably be fine as a number 2, free agent at this point. Does it excite me? Am I absolutely over the moon about it? No, but in terms of having a number 2, you just need someone who's steady and stable. I really like Matty Ryan. I think that would actually be a very sensible pickup in those areas, but I wouldn't be surprised if we go sort of championship shopping again here.
I mean, obviously, you mentioned him last season. Someone like Georgi Petrovic looks like he's going to be leaving Chelsea. I mean, he's more of a £25 million kind of buy. He would challenge Bernd Leno. That would be a quite ambitious move.
Yes. The thing is, I think we don't have all that much money, and I don't think we're going to go drop £25 million on a goalkeeper to challenge Bernd Leno when we're pretty comfortable with him between the sticks right now. Would I like us to go and pick someone up who might be a potential successor? Yes. But I don't think if we have a limited budget, and look, we will talk about outgoings, I'm sure, throughout the course of this, but I don't see that many on the way out of Fulham. And that means I think the budget is going to be limited. So I'd be very surprised if we don't just go for the kind of number 2 option right now.
I sometimes find it interesting, especially with the goalkeeper position. You come up against like a great goalkeeper. I mean, Wigan, I can't remember his name, but Wigan's goalkeeper we played in the FA Cup had a brilliant game that day. And you sometimes wonder, like, being a solid Premier League club, is that appealing to someone in, you know, really good goalkeeper, either lower Championship, upper League One?
Being number 2.
Being number 2 behind Bernd Leno, it's not impossible that you get into the first team. You're going to play quite a few cup games. I guess it's that kind of ambition versus
I think it's about character, right? Like certain players and certain keepers, I think in particular, are quite happy to go and fulfill squad roles.
I mean, I guess that was Stephen Bender, right?
Right, but like this is
a good Championship goalkeeper, but then we found out.
Yeah, but like you actually kind of look at someone like a Marcus Bettinelli who, you know, fulfilled that role as a good Championship goalkeeper for a while and then kind of flitted in and out of the first team with Fulham in the Premier League. They decided he wasn't good enough to uphold that role permanently. And then obviously Marek Rodak came through as well to kind of push him. And he at that point clearly decided that what he wanted to do for his career was kind of think about the future, think about coaching. Obviously it helps his dad's a coach, right? But, you know, and go into those different roles, first at Chelsea, obviously now at Manchester City, where he's going to fulfill a different purpose. You know, it's part of the squad, part of, you know, someone who's kind of a bit of a mentor figure to younger players, etc. And that appeals to some people. So like I'm sure you could find goalkeepers who that is kind of what they want to do as their next step, especially if the club are like, we'll help you through your coaching badges. But I think if you're doing that, you're probably looking at someone towards the end of their career as opposed to, you know, in their prime.
Yeah, this is something I thought about European football. I think if you'd qualified even for a Conference League, I think there's a level of goalkeeper who you could persuade to be number 2 because actually you're going to play 10, 15 matches when you throw in the Conference League and the Carabao Cup and everything else. But I think there is a risk you go be a number 2 at Fulham. We get knocked out in the first rounds of the Carabao and the FA Cup.
You play 2 games.
Yeah, and you play 2 games and Bernd Leno plays all the other 38 and that's an incredible...
That's your season.
Yeah, that's your season. I guess that's the risk at a club of Fulham stature in the Premier League, right? Left back. Now... There's obviously 2 scenarios here. I still think Anthony Robinson is maybe the one who... I don't think Anthony Robinson's going to leave. We've talked about how a lot of the potential suitors...
I just don't see it.
Do you not? I mean, there's been the Spurs links.
I don't hugely see it. I just don't think that Spurs will pay the money that Fulham would want to sell Anthony Robinson at this point. I think Fulham would demand over £50 million, and fair enough.
Yeah.
For Anthony Robinson, and you can use the Kirkes, you know, deal as a bookmark and be like, well, if that's what they're paying for Milos Kirkes, then we want the same for Anthony Robinson, who's actually far more proven in the Premier League. And so I think that Fulham would use that. And I don't think Spurs are going to splash £50 million on a left back.
I also believe with Anthony Robinson, I've said this for a while, that I genuinely think Anthony's focus will be the World Cup.
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to start. He doesn't need a move to get a place in that US team.
No, especially the way that Max Arston played in the World Cup. So.
He will be the starting left back for the US. He needs to recover from his surgery
and play every game
for Fulham. So but I guess the thing at left back is I would like a proper left back depth.
Do you? So this is the thing. Like when in terms of,
I don't like Sessegnon there. I'll say it.
But like I don't mind Timmy Castagna there.
But he's never used Castagna there. He's had opportunities to. I just get the impression he doesn't trust Castagna at left back.
I just feel like, you know, when we're kind of looking at this in terms of, I think you have to look at it within the prism of Fulham have a budget, a bucket, right, of money that they're going to be able to spend. It's not that deep. And I'm like, where are we looking at the squad that I'm like absolutely 100% needs improvement? And you're not going to bring in a left back to challenge Anthony Robinson. Right, like we've tried that. Fodo Ballatore.
Well, Fodo Ballatore is the kind of player I'd love to have back.
Yeah,
on loan.
I can imagine. Like, and maybe there's a loan. Maybe there's a loan deal for a backup left back. That's something that I think Fulham might explore at some point. But in terms of where I would like to allocate money to the squad, then suddenly I think that kind of changes the perspective of it. Because if we're going to go and spend 20 million on a left back, that's probably not the move that I would be making with the squad in the shape that it's in right now. If we have, I don't know, let's say £80 million to spend, I don't know, I'll pluck that figure out of the air. It's not an accurate estimation. But in terms of if that's where we're at and that's the money we have, then I think there are positions of far greater need than at left back.
Well then, okay, I guess the question is then right back almost we can go on to, because the two kind of play into each other here.
Yeah, right back's fine.
Yeah, well, you've got two, obviously. You've got Tete and you've got Timothy
And
Castagna.
both very good right backs as well.
But then are you not a little bit short in the fact that you effectively got probably, I assume that Tete starts the season.
Yeah.
And that obviously Robinson starts the season. And then I guess in theory, Castagna can cover both.
Yeah.
But
swing, as they say.
As we found out last season, though, 3 players to cover 2 positions is not a lot.
No, but obviously, like, I know what you're saying about Cesc, but like there is obviously a world where he's able to play that role in a push. And I think that that's probably what Marco Silva's thinking in terms of his squad versatility. Like that he'll be able to put in a Sessegnon should the need arise. You know, like the thing is that trying to convince someone to come in, we talked about this with number 9s before, but trying to convince someone to come in and be like, yeah, you're going to challenge Anthony Robinson for that spot is a very difficult ask. Like, and they will have looked at what's happened with other left backs over the course of the last couple of years and be like, well, no one could get a look in because Jedi's been so good, but also so consistent in terms of not missing games from injury, etc. That there kind of is a sense of, well, am I coming in just to sit on the bench?
But I think that Robinson likely goes next summer. I wouldn't be surprised if he's played the World Cup. That's a big thing for him to play in a home World Cup.
Yeah.
Either he impresses at that World Cup and therefore his stock is super high, or just possibly goes like, I'm looking for the next challenge of my career. I've spent a long time at Fulham. I'm obviously at kind of an age where it's probably now or never to get my big club.
Yeah.
And therefore, like, wouldn't bringing in someone that, like, actually, okay, look, you're going to struggle to get in the first team this year, but you're early 20s and there's a pathway, possibly a year out, to replace Anthony Robinson. So we're not left in the situation where next summer we are looking for an Anthony Robinson replacement.
Sure, but if you're looking for an Anthony Robinson replacement, you should probably have £50 million in your pocket to spend on it if you need to, right? Because that money will have come in. What happens if you bring in someone with that idea and then Jedi just goes, you know what, I just like to see out my days at Fulham?
But yeah, I just don't see that happening. I don't see what player would do. Let's be honest.
I don't know. I think he's just quite happy here. Like, I really do. I think it's a very comfortable environment, and it's not something that's held him back in terms of international career. You know, he's playing at a very, very high level. And unless, look, I'm not saying that this is necessarily kind of a locked on, but like, unless someone comes in next summer, a big club, and goes, right, we're going to put the money on the table for Anthony Robinson, the chances are that one of them might not. You know, City have just bought Ryan Aït-Nouri. Liverpool have just bought Milos Kerkez. You know, we've seen Patrick Dorgu go to Manchester United. Okay, it depends if you're considering them as a big club anymore or whatever. But like, you look at Destiny Udogie, who's Tottenham's left back for the foreseeable future, right? Like, there is not loads of space. And you can make the argument that plenty of Arsenal's left back options are very, very capable in those areas. So unless you're going into Europe and starting to look in there, and does everyone have the money in Europe to actually go and spend £50 million on a left back? I don't know. No. I'd be surprised.
The only thing is if Robinson impressed at the World Cup, I think that is the kind of thing that would trigger a bigger club to be like.
Fine, but I do think it's kind of interesting that a lot of the pathways that I potentially foresaw opening up for him have kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And they've been shut down with long-term options. You know, these are all players that I've just reeled off there who are younger than Anthony Robinson, and they have that kind of 10-year runway in front of them that's potentially to go and make a difference. And I just think that we're kind of looking at it from a perspective of, oh, someone will come in. There is a relatively high chance, I think, that someone doesn't.
Yeah,
that actually those pathways don't open up.
I was trying to get prepared. I was actually more expecting you to be. I guess you are right though. Like if we get 50 million for Anthony Robinson, the ideal maths is that we then go and spend 30 million on someone who is
or 20. On someone who's younger, and then you have 30 million to reinvest in the rest of the squad.
Yeah.
Like I think I would wait, and I think the thing is, if you bring in a loanee, let's say you bring in a loanee with an option to buy, which is a possibility.
Yeah,
how much are we going to actually see of them? Are we going to see enough of them to actually, make a decision whether that's worth it or not? Because Jedi is actually going to be playing.
Well, that was the Balotelli problem, right?
Yeah.
He came in and actually he looked good.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, this is a player, but he played against Norwich City from memory in the Carabao Cup, and by the time it got serious in the Carabao Cup, we wanted Anthony Robinson back in because we were considering trying to win it. So it is. I mean, it's the eternal problem with depth, and it will come on in a couple other positions, no doubt as well. Centre back. Now, obviously, we had a lot of debates about who should be the starting centre backs last year. I mean, I think we're fairly sold that Calvin Bassey no change.
No change.
No consideration of any change there. His backup was Jorge Cuenca, who has been linked with a few moves away.
Yeah, I think that's the one that triggers it. If he leaves, then I think suddenly we're in a different conversation. But right now, I think you probably leave the centre-back core as it is, especially if there is the emergence of Luke de Fougeros. If he does sign that new contract, then potentially you have a fifth option in there to help with the rotation. The only weird one is Issa Diop, because obviously he wasn't in the squad for the last few games of the season. You know, really felt like he'd been kind of sidelined by Marco Silva. And I wonder if that is a precursor to him potentially leaving this summer. And if so, do you trust in the potential of de Fougeros, or do you bring someone else in?
I think what I would look, I liked Issa Diop. I kind of defended Issa Diop a lot. And I actually felt like our performances went downhill when we brought Anderson back in over Diop, apart from there was a couple of moments where Diop made a mistake. Bournemouth comes to mind, but ultimately,
hugely his fault.
No, I know. I actually thought that Diop and Bassi had a great relationship, but for whatever reason, Marco's obviously not super keen on Issa Diop, and in Marco we trust in that sense.
Yeah,
I would like us to spend money on someone that can challenge Joachim Andersen properly, because clearly Marco didn't think that Issa could.
Fine. So I would posit this to you. If we are looking at this as a potential kind of, moment, and Luke de Fougeros is on the verge of either signing a new contract or walking away, right?
Yeah.
And there's been interest from MLS sides, there's been interest from sides back home in Canada, etc. So if you bring in another centre-back there, a right-sided centre-back, are you basically saying to him, the door is shut? Because we talk about this quite a lot, right? We talk about it with Josh King. We talk about it with opportunities for young players. If you go and bring in a number 10 right this summer, even if Andreas Pereira leaves, let's say, to challenge Emil Smith-Rowe, are you shutting the door on Josh King? Are you basically like, there's no space for you here?
Yeah, when
that
that is a problem.
I wonder if the Fougeros, if we go and sign another right-sided centre-back, he's like, well, what am I doing here? Why would I try and continue my time at Fulham if there is going to be, the pathway is going to be continually shut. Now, look, I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, by the way. He might be good enough, he might not. We don't know that yet. He's been very impressive in his performances for Canada, and I think that the ceiling is potentially very high. But equally, if we don't feel like that we can trust him at this point, maybe the best move is to move away. Maybe the best move is a loan. I don't know what that looks like right now. But I think that if you do go and sign a centre-back, even if Diop leaves, you either have to make sure that de Fougeros goes out on a loan where he's going to get minutes, or you're going to kind of, you're basically shutting the door on him and going, no, you're going to sit another season where you're just going to be vaguely on the bench occasionally and stuff.
It feels...
He said it, right? He said that, I need to go and play senior football. He came out after, one of the Canada games and was like, if that's a loan in the championship, whatever it is, I need to be playing next season because I need to get that senior minutes under my belt. It's not the same as playing in PL2. And I thought it was a really brave thing to say, but also a very kind of fair one. He does need those minutes.
At 19 and at a position like centre-back where you need experience as well as kind of fitness and skill and stuff, it feels to me like a championship loan would be really smart for Luke de Fougeros.
In which case, do you bring in a player on loan as well? Because then you're saying to him, look, we're not going and spending 20 odd million on someone who's going to be there for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
We're bringing in someone so your development can continue, where you're playing regular minutes, and we like that, but we see a pathway for you. Or I suppose the flip side of that argument is you go, Joachim Andersen maybe has 2 years left at the top level. And you go, you're going to get 2 loans, mid-table championship loan, then a top-tier championship loan, and then we think you'll be ready for the first team. Yeah. And that's maybe how you do it. And you go, well, by the time that Joachim comes to, 34, we foresee you as his replacement. So maybe you can bring in someone else in terms of actually being a long-term prospect, and it'd be like you two are going to challenge for the role in the future once Anderson moves on.
So we're saying, just for the record, no new defenders, or maybe one right-sided centre-back effectively to challenge Joachim Andersen in the short term.
If Issa Diop leaves.
If Issa Diop leaves.
Yeah, I think so. And if Jorge Cuenca leaves, I think you need a little bit of depth in that area as well. But maybe you get a swing defender who can play both.
I feel like it would be a bit crazy for us to get rid of Jorge Cuenca after he impressed in most of his performances.
I just think
there was a few mistakes.
He might be like, I'm not going to get in ahead of Calvin Bassey. Which is fair enough.
Yeah, fair. All right, we can take a break on defenders because we'll go midfielders and the rest of the team afterwards. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. Sammy here on the Friday Club with Jack Collins. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Friday Club has become a bit of a thing. Usually after Thursday games.
Yeah,
we were hoping that the Friday Club was going to be a regular occurrence this season, but sadly, it's a different ballgame.
Yeah,
Maybe
obviously. Brighton have been involved in the whole will they be in the in Europe conversation.
I'm quite glad we're not involved in that.
Yeah,
it's
so
kind of
am I.
weird. Like the idea of like occasionally getting in through the back door, like on a technicality, feels even weirder.
It is the Fulham way, though. We got into Europe a couple of times through fair play. So
that's different. That's different. Fair play is fair.
Getting through on multi-club ownership would have been very Fulham.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we're not doing the whole will they won't they dance. I'll be honest.
I
don't think I could cope with it.
I played five-a-side with a Brighton fan last night, and I was just making conversation, and I was like, oh, looks like Palace aren't getting in, and I was like, looks like though Palace will go down to the Conference League and Forest will go up to the Europa League, and he went full on, no, Brighton fans have been reading the terms and conditions of UEFA, they've been deep diving, they can't go down to the Conference League, they've either got to be kicked out or they've got to stay. And I was like, you've spent your summer basically reading the UEFA technical directive on European competition.
Touch grass.
Right, we were halfway through our squad analysis for the season, so let's move on to defensive midfield. Now, this is where I think it might get spicy because we disagreed about this last season. So generally, Marcus Silva plays two holding midfielders. Mm-hmm. Kind of, are they a 6? Are they an 8? It's kind of up to Marco, but generally that's what he did. So we've got Sasha, we've got Sander. Do we think that we're going to get any depth there?
I think we need two. And obviously it depends on what happens here. Do we think that Harrison Reed is going to be playing for the club next season? Do we think Tom Kearney is going to get that new contract? We don't know about any of this. So obviously there are things up in the air, but I
think TC will stay. That's the only thing I'm fairly confident
I think TC will stay as well. Even if TC stays, I think we need two. If Harrison stays as well, then potentially you change this thing. But I am pretty set that we need two central midfielders. I thought it was the area we were short last year. And now I think that we have the potential of another one leaving in Harrison Reed. So I think you need two players in here. This is where I would spend the bulk.
Do you mean two if Harrison Reed stays?
Two if Harrison Reed leaves.
Okay, right. Because I was going to say that will suddenly be quite a lot.
Yeah, 100%. But also like the amount we played Andreas in central midfield, right, last year. I think partly out of necessity, partly out of trying to crowbar him into the team. I think we'll all probably agree that if one player leaves this summer, it's probably likely to be Andreas.
Yeah.
And look, whether Marco wants that or not, and personally, I would rather he stayed. I'm a huge Andreas advocate and always have been. But I think he's probably the most likely to leave of the entire first team squad. So I think we need two central midfielders, maybe one defensive midfielder and one sort of number 8, right, with a little bit more of a creative spark. And I wrote a list at the start of the summer. Players that I thought Fulham should be interested in these kind of areas. And the one that's kind of tickled my interest a little bit recently is I think that if Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall leaves Chelsea, there's a market there for a mid-table club to potentially take a little bit of a gamble on a Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, because I think he's a really good player, but he's never going to get minutes in this Chelsea team. And I think you may be able to get him at a cut price because they're literally he's going to be like, I need to leave. Player. I really like him. He might be slightly too much of an 8-10 tweener for us to really take an interest, especially with Emma Smith-Rowe and Josh King there. But actually, if you could make him into a number 8, I think he'd be a really, really clever player for Fulham. The players I wrote down were Javi Guerra from Valencia, Samu Costa at Mallorca, Tanner Tessman at Lyon. That was partly infused by the idea that Lyon might be getting relegated and everyone would leave. Yeah, that's not happening anymore.
He's US international, isn't he?
He is a US international, but I think, and hasn't really got the minutes at international stage, but I think him coming to the Premier League, I think he has a physical presence for it, someone who really kind of could make that step. I do really like him. Hugo Sotelo from Celta Vigo, who's a little bit more of a creative player in those areas. I don't know if Celta would sell now because they've already sold Fer Lopez to Wolves, and I think that might be their big sale of the summer, but he's a very, very interesting
They wouldn't
footballer.
sell to us.
There he is. That's why they pay him the big bucks. Rocco Wrights, who we've been linked with, who I really, really like.
ITK Jack Kelly on that one.
I think he's a very, very good player. And considering that Mönchengladbach only want around 20 million euros for him, I think more teams should be chomping at the bit, for Rocco Wrights. I think he's a really, really good footballer. That kind of defensively minded player that I think we're looking for in those areas. The other couple of players I like, Kaiju Sano Mines, who's had a really, really good season, like a bit of a kind of ball-winning machine in the middle of that midfield. We were linked briefly with Amine Adli, who's his midfield partner, but I think that Sano is probably the better of the two and the younger of the two. And the last one I like in this kind of like, I really like Hayden Hackney at Middlesbrough.
Okay, there's some quite big clubs interested in Hayden Hackney.
Yes, one of them is apparently Fulham, according to a number of different sources. But I've read that off the Transfer Flow kind of podcast and their bit from the old people behind StatsBomb. But Fulham are one of the clubs interested. The people who run that podcast think that is the very sensible next step for him, that he'd be able to actually work his way into this Fulham team as a deep lying player and feed the players in front of him. He's not all that creative, but it does a lot of the hard yards, and he's a very, very good passer of the ball. So I think Hayden Hackney would be a very interesting one if Fulham were to get involved in that conversation. But a few names there.
Do we think that any of these names seriously challenge Sasha and Sander for starting spots?
Rocco Wright does. Rocco Wright 100% does. To be honest, I'll be honest, I think Hayden Hackney does as well. I think both of those players come in there and they make a difference. I also think that what you're looking for here is the ability to mix it up. Sandra and Sasha are brilliant, right? And we know that they have that combination. But against teams who are playing, further down, like against Southampton, for example, we saw Sasha come in and really change the game, right, in terms of his influence on it. But I think you do need potentially another creative force in there to be able to actually dictate higher up and actually push forward into that. You remember in the Championship, Fulham played a lot of the time with kind of a single 6 and the other 8 pushing up to become a kind of 10.
Yeah.
Right? And what we saw there was that ability to really take control of games in the final third when we were on top. And I wonder if there are going to be games this season where we're just missing something else in there. And that's where I think you need potentially a Kim Dewsbury Hall type, right? A Hugo Stella, for example, who comes in there and is able to step forward a little bit more, kind of push up into that number 10 role alongside whoever's playing there and make a difference. And I think that profile of an 8 who can get into those areas but is still willing to do the hard yards is something that the squad's kind of missing.
Yeah, I think that like sometimes last season, I loved the kind of Sasha Sander barrier. It was quite comforting knowing that effectively they were mostly
patrolling.
But I do think maybe some teams and managers started to work out that actually there was very little attacking threat really from either of them. Therefore, you could almost afford to commit more players forward because you didn't have to worry that either of them was really going to go on that many marauding runs. I know Sasha is occasionally capable.
They're both capable of it, but they haven't been instructed to do that, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it does mean that when you have different games and different game states, you need to be able to change it up. And I think we're missing that player.
And actually, the second half of that Southampton game was a particularly interesting one where he did change Sander for Sasha, if I'm not mistaken, and basically allowed the squad to attack a little bit more because we didn't need 2 holding midfielders in that particular game. And although it took a long time and a lot of frustration to eventually break through Southampton, we did, and that was an important win along the road. I wonder though if Marco just felt like he didn't quite have the tools at his disposal, didn't quite have the midfielder he really wanted. And Sasha played well in that game.
But also, like, this is probably worth pointing out. Like, we know that Marco loves Andreas, right? But him trying to shoehorn him into a number 8 role, and I know that he did obviously play that in Brazil with Flamengo and whatever, but it just hasn't translated in the way that we would have hoped, I think.
Yeah.
And especially with the confusion on the pitch. You can see that he potentially does want a more creative player deeper in the midfield, but he was kind of trying to shoehorn one in as opposed to finding a player who's a natural fit for that role.
Andreas was Andreas is not careful enough to play deep in midfield. That was always the thing. You could see the logic. He works really hard.
Can you bring that player in? The player that Marco was kind of trying to force Andreas to be.
Yes.
Who is a bit more careful on the ball, but also is capable of creating from a deeper
Andreas
area.
made too many mistakes. And mistakes in that part of the pitch cost us. Yeah, rather than mistakes when you're playing number 10. And Andreas has always been a player that makes a lot of mistakes.
He's a risk taker.
He needs someone that is capable of playing that kind of like creative pass, setting someone free, but also won't just give you a ball to the best midfield and concede a goal.
Yes, exactly.
So, okay, we think that... I think maybe one player plus Harrison Reed would be fine. The thing is, again, though, in a similar case to Issa Diop...
Does Marco trust him?
I just don't think so.
So therefore, is there a point in him being in the squad?
Like, I like Harrison Reed.
No, I love Harrison
I could see a reason, but a lot of it sometimes comes down to sentimentality because of what Harrison Reed has achieved here, and he's been a great player and a great servant for Fulham, and he clearly seems like a
good guy.
A good guy.
100%. Like, also, I've said this before, but there is a different world where Harrison Reed had been converted to a right back and was playing for a top team right now. I really do think that's a thing that he could have done if he had played in that role, because he's tenacious enough for it. He has the crossing ability. We've seen that in the dead ball ability. I do wonder what would have happened, because he played a little bit there when he was at Norwich. You know, he kind of rotated between the two roles. I do wonder if he'd taken a separate path, what that might have looked like.
Yeah, and there was that moment, I think the first season we came up to the Premier League where Harrison had that kind of like purple patch where he was scoring goals. He ended up on that right side of midfield. I'd be sad to see him go. But,
so would I, but I think that if Marco doesn't trust him, like, this is the thing. It comes down to basically this. If Marco is willing to play him, we should keep Harrison Reed. If he's not, then we should get rid of him, because there's no point in knocking around in the squad to be not trusted. It doesn't make sense to me.
100%. Then we come on to number 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we think Andreas will go.
Yeah.
I personally just think it's time. I know that you disagree with this and you think that the chickens will come home to roost when we get rid of Andreas Pereira. I just think that ultimately Andreas just doesn't have enough output attacking wise.
Yeah.
And yes, he is good at closing down. I think there will be the odd game next season where we go, could have done with Andreas today, but I think they will be fewer than the games we go like, bloody Andreas, he was a nightmare today.
Yeah.
And I just think ultimately someone in those positions needs to be getting more goals, assists, or at least the second assist. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think Andreas did any of those. I don't think that his set piece ability keeps him in this squad. I think that seems to have drifted down. So I'm kind of of the opinion. And also, I think he gets in the way of both Emil Smith-Rowe and Josh King.
Yeah. Also, I think he's one of the few sellable assets in this team. There isn't loads of players that Fulham could actually sell. And so if they do need to raise funds, I get it. Like, I do understand. And I think that point you make last is probably the salient one. You know, do we want to see more of Josh King, and do we want to see Emil Smith-Rowe take this team by the scruff of the neck and become the player that everyone was hoping he would be? There's no guarantee that happens. It's probably worth pointing out, but I don't think you want another player in the way of Josh King. So I think that ultimately, whether he stays or goes, you're not signing anyone in the 10 position. Maybe you sign a winger who is capable, like a Harry Wilson player.
Yeah. We've also got two players in Alex Iwobi and Harry Wilson
who can play
10.
Yeah.
So I just really think spending any money on a 10 would just get in the way of others.
The only exception potentially to this rule is if you buy a winger who can function as a 10, and I think the Harvey Elliott links probably speak to that, right? Like, Harvey Elliott, I think, is probably best off the right-hand side, but fundamentally can play in the number 10 role.
Yeah.
If you buy Harvey Elliott, I think that maybe changes the picture a little bit.
Any player that's got a second position is fantastic.
Yeah.
As we found out, they're incredibly useful because it just means you've got a little bit of versatility. But ultimately, if you're signing Harvey Elliott, you're buying him for the right. You're not buying him probably to go in the number 10.
No. I think that's right. Yeah.
And like, even if you did get offered the best number 10 in the world, in a world where Cole Palmer suddenly is coming and playing at number 10 for Fulham. I know he doesn't always play number 10, but he can definitely play number 10 if he wants to. But you are creating other problems, because then what do you do with Smith-Rowe? What do you do with Josh King? Because
I suppose, like, ultimately, if you got offered a player of Palmer's caliber, you'd sell Emil Smith-Rowe. That's what you would do. But like, we're not going to get offered that player, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
like it's time for. It's time for Emil Smith-Rowe to go, right, this is my team, I'm the number 10, I'm playing it. Yeah. Like, that's the time it is. So now we see if he can do that or not. Yeah. And he has to be given the look, whether you like him or dislike him, and I know there's a lot of frustration around Emil Smith-Rowe's performances last season, and that's fine. I was one of them. But whether you like him or dislike him, it's time for him to be given the opportunity to be the guy in this team.
Yeah.
And we will never know if he's capable of that until he's given that run of games and that run of... And look, we might be sitting here in January being like, he's not the guy. He's not that guy, and he's never going to be that guy. We're going to have to bring someone in to be that guy, or Josh King is going to have to given the keys to the castle.
Yeah. Andreas, we're sorry.
Come on back,
please.
But you have to give him that opportunity. You know, it's been in and out of the team. There's been injuries, there's been issues. Fine, he's got a full preseason now. This is the moment for him to assert himself. Yeah. So let's find out.
It's sink or swim, really, isn't it?
Yeah, let's find out. At the end of this season, we will have an answer one way or the other.
Yeah. Left wing. Now we've got a lot.
I just sort of thought about wingers in general, as opposed to
Okay, all right. But wingers in general. So players that we have. Sessegnon will stay. Iwobi will stay.
We think so. Atletico Madrid interested, apparently.
I don't see it.
100 million on the table, or 90 million and you get Smith Rowe for free. I'm joking.
So Sessegnon, Iwobi, Harry Wilson, Adama Traore. There is effectively 2 wingers that can play each position. So what are we looking for?
One extra body, I think.
A starter?
Yeah, I think so. I think someone to make a difference. And this is where I think it gets interesting, because I think this is the place where you can go kind of rocket fuel on it. You can really upgrade. You can really bring in a player who might be able to turn the screw in terms of Fulham getting into Europe. And I think that, well, right now, for example, Juventus are trying to haggle with Porto. Porto want 30 million euros for Chico Conceição, who in my opinion is one of the best wingers in Europe. And Juventus are trying to lowball them with an offer of 22 million. Go in there, walk into Portugal and put 30 million euros on the table for Chico Conceição. Show us you're brave, right? And look, he might not come. I'm not saying that he's going to trade Juventus for Fulham. But I think that there is a Portuguese contingent here. There's a Marco Silva who might be able to speak to him, who obviously knows his father. Like, there is a level of this that you could go, right, we're showing intent here. We're going to be bold. We are walking in there and be like, there you go. There's a 30 million release clause for Chico Conceição. Does he want to come? We don't know. But we are putting our chips on the table. That, I think, is the kind of player that changes a season. I think that's the kind of player you bring in and you're like, wow, okay, Fulham mean business. Like, they're not mucking about here. They brought in a player who is fundamentally going to be a superstar. And we've seen that, at Juve, for Portugal, even when he was at Porto. Like, he's just a phenomenal footballer and has been since he was about 15 years old. And I think that there are opportunities here in the market that people are just not taking advantage of. There were some strange things. Even the Fer Lopez one for Wolves and Celta. I was looking at it being like, if he's actually 20 million euros, why on earth are more teams not in there making this deal, like getting that deal done? I think the same about Rocco Wright. If he's 20 million euros, put that money on the table. Like, these are players who their ceiling is so incredibly high and the risk factor at that price is so low. So that's kind of where I'm at with the winger. I feel like we should go in really, really above the parapet. And look, if we have to come down from that, we walk back. Someone like a Jeremy Pino or Jeremiah Hernandez, who's still at Deportivo for no reason whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned. Someone like a Romano Schmid of Werder Bremen, who's a bit more of a kind of 10 interior, but I think is a really interesting player who could operate from the flanks. Diego Lopez at Valencia, who's had a brilliant season, really, really impressive. Another youngster, Valencia still in the financial mire. Can you take advantage of that? And then the last one I had on the list was Harvey Elliott, but I don't know if that's going to be possible in the market right now.
I think Harvey Elliott...
I think he's going to end up at Newcastle.
Yeah,
it stinks of it.
I mean, obviously Brighton have been linked with him quite heavily as well.
Yeah, fine. It feels right. I just feel like it would be an interesting one if Fulham did bring him back. Yeah, I
just feel like if he's got those options on the table, I feel like... I know that players don't really care about the reception that they get at clubs. Obviously, if Fulham offer him exactly what he wants,
if Fulham signed him, I think that everybody the tune would change quite.
Oh, everyone would suddenly
the homecoming hero.
Yeah. We always loved you.
What do you mean? We were booing someone else.
Yeah, boo earns.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have 5 wingers, which is ultimately what we think Fulham need. 4 is just a little bit thin on the ground, and we don't have a lot of. And the thing with our wingers as well is just sometimes it was a bit stale, right? Sometimes,
and also bear in mind we are going to be losing players for AFCON, so Iwobi goes out for a month.
Yeah,
Bassi as well, which is why there needs to be a backup left centre back. We didn't kind of talk about that at the time, but it's part of that discussion. But like with Iwobi out for a month, and also we've seen it before when players come back from AFCON, it takes them a little while to come back up to speed. That's a tournament that saps life out of people, and for a brilliant reason, it's an incredible tournament. But like it matters so much that I think players come back from it and they're like, whoa.
It's also a different position, isn't it? Unlike goalkeeper and even striker, to a point where generally you try not to change. Especially, goalkeeper, fullbacks and stuff. An ideal game plan normally is
consistency.
We don't change that really. Maybe bring someone on the last 10 minutes if you need to. Wingers are like a bit like props in rugby, aren't they? They sometimes do 55 minutes and then you need to bring on another winger to change it up. They're the easiest way of bringing and injecting some life into the game. So you can have, I feel like, a lot of wingers and get away with it from a squad management point of view, because you're like, well, you're starting but you're finishing. You can't say that to a right back.
Yeah.
You can't say, oh yeah, no, generally we're gonna swap swap you at half time, actually. Give Kenny Tete a half and give Timmy Castagna a half. That's not how it works.
I think we just need a bit more explosivity.
I agree. We've got a lot of very technical wingers, haven't we? They're good on the ball,
and Adama.
Got a good touch. Oh, yeah, and then the battering ram. Probably Adama becomes almost like the fifth choice winger if you bring in someone high quality. I mean, it depends if it's on the left or
but also, like, I think that we've seen it this year. Wingers are just quite like slightly more likely to pick up knocks.
Yeah,
like because of the way that they play, because there's a lot of one-on-one, there's a lot of kind of contact involved with that. Like players do pick up knocks in those positions, so you do need depth in those areas. I just think this is a place. There's not loads of places in the squad where I'm like, right, we need to make a change immediately in order to upgrade and move forward.
Is there a case for 2 more wingers? Is there a case for having 6 wingers at the club? Or is that a bit much?
There's a case, but I think what it would suggest is that you're going to play an Iwobi or a Harry Wilson more as a 10 at times, and is that going to continue to do what we said earlier, which is block that pathway for Josh King? So there's probably a question mark slightly over that. I think one would be fine.
Okay.
But there is also a chance that, some of these players aren't here. I think they stay. If I'm a betting man.
I don't see anyone going other than Andreas.
I wonder if, we see a Saudi offer for an Adama.
Maybe. I guess.
It wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me if that came out of the blue.
But in that case, you just replace like for like. You've lost a player, you need to bring in a player.
Yeah, so I think it's 1 at the moment, 2 if one of them leaves.
Yeah. Then finally, up front, Rodrigo and Raul are the kind of like partnership who between them got 20 goals in the Premier League last season. So almost in the aggregate, we had a 20 goal a season striker between them. You imagine that once again, we will try and give Rodrigo the start with Raul coming off the bench, which obviously was the plan last season. It just happened that Rodrigo didn't start well and then Raul came in firing.
Yeah.
Eventually it got to a little bit more parity. Do we need what do we do about the third striker? Because it's a really, really difficult one. I mean, we did have one that we sold to Celtic, which is quite annoying. But
it didn't sell.
We let go.
Leave. Well, I mean, I've had this conversation with you before, and this complaint about the fact that you throw Carlos Vinicius, who was washing dishes up to that point, into those games instead of Callum Osmond, and this is what happens, right? Like then he goes, well, there's no future, there's no pathway for me here, because if Carlos Vinicius is getting a game ahead of me, then what am I doing? And off he goes. Look, Callum Osman might be a success, he might be a failure. We don't know. Like, it's not that, and we have to trust in the idea that Fulham thought that the pathway was right. Look, everyone makes mistakes, right? Brighton let Victor Gyökeres go for peanuts, and he's ended up looking like he's going to get a £70 million move back to the Premier League with Arsenal. So it's not that everyone is infallible, right? These things can happen. But I do think we probably need a third striker. And I think we probably want one with a slightly different profile. That's the thing that I think is maybe interesting, so that you can, if you're throwing 2 up front, it's not, the end of the world later on in games, etc. It's one of the things that Jay Stansfield had going for him. But one of the players that we were very briefly linked to, I really like, is Tolu Orokadare at Genk, who is a big boy. Big boy, 6'4". And what I think is really interesting about him is he's not very good in the air yet. At some point, he is going to get good in the air. And when he gets good in the air, he's going to be one of the most complete strikers in Europe, because a lot of his goals that he's scoring at the moment are from balls running on and actually, getting in behind, those kind of shots on the angle, etc. I really like his footwork for a big fella. And whilst he hasn't kind of mastered the aerial aspect of that yet, I do think that at some point we're looking at a player there that might explode. So I think that's a good gamble if Fulham are going to make one in that area. Annoyingly, I wrote this list at the start of the summer, and one of the players I had on this list was Gonzalo Garcia at Real Madrid, who was looking like at the start of the summer he was going to leave for about 7 million euros. Getafe were sort of interested. I was like, if he's going at that price, someone needs to get involved, because he's a really interesting player. He's broke the Castilla record for goals scored at under level for Real Madrid in a single season. He's got a lot in terms of his physicality. He's not the biggest player in the world, but he's got a really strong frame, holds the ball up well, links well. Unfortunately, he's gone and scored 4 goals and got an assist in 5 games at the Club World Cup. So I think he's going to be in the plans at Real Madrid now. It's quite annoying.
I totally get that. But in fairness, like, were we ever going to convince someone like him, who would have been he had a deal agreed with Getafe, and I think he would have gone in there as second striker. So okay, maybe, but like at that age, at 21, 22, you're going, look, the opportunities are going to come. Look where Raul is in his career. Like, these opportunities are going to arrive. Maybe not, and also I'm not saying that you get every single one of these players that you look at, but I think that's the kind of market that Fulham should be like shopping in. And there was another one that went this summer. Again, I think you're right. I think you really struggled to convince him to come in and be third choice, but Ferran Jutgla left Club Brugge, and he's gone to Celta Vigo.
and that deal was about 5 million. And you're like, someone's just picked up an absolute bargain there. One of my predictions about 3 years ago was that he would go to a Champions League club for about 20 million pounds. So he's undercut that. He's ended up joining a Europa League club for less than that, shall we say.
Yeah.
But like, I do think that there's a real player there, and there's some really interesting markets. There's a couple of other things here. Obviously, someone like Pavlidis, I suggested a couple of years ago. I still think there's an opportunity. Never mention it. But you kind of look at that. Is there a place there that if that kind of player's on the market, you go come in and be the number 9? Is there a place for Fulham to do that? I don't know. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm saying that if you get the opportunity, there's a couple of other players. Luka Jovic is a free agent after bouncing around for quite some time. I wonder, there's talk of him going to Mexico and joining Cruz Azul, but like, could you convince Luka Jovic to come in and be a bit of a senior figure in the squad and potentially kind of bounce around? I think he's a really interesting footballer still at this point, and one of the few bright spots in Milan's season last year. So I'm surprised he's been allowed to expire in that regard. There's also like the likes of someone like a Flo Balogun, who has fallen down the pecking order at Monaco, mostly due to injury. But then they signed Mika Biereth, ex-Fulham, and he's been banging them in for fun. So now at this point, Flo Balogun finds himself behind Biereth, behind Mbolo in the pecking order at Monaco. I wonder if you could convince him to come back to London at this point.
One of the players that we've been linked with is Ricardo Pepi at PSV.
That's what I mean. So if Fulham are being linked with Pepi, it suggests to me that Fulham are in the market for a starting number 9. You're not bringing Ricardo Pepi in to be third choice striker.
No, which obviously opens the door to all of the Muniz links to Leeds and all of that.
The other one is Lois Openda, because I think Leipzig have shot themselves in the foot by not selling Benjamin Šeško, and they need to make a sale. Could you get involved in that? Because that's very interesting.
I guess this is the question, right? This comes down to the question of, do we trust Rodrigo Muniz to be our starting striker? I would like to see us bank on Muniz next season.
Yeah, and that's fine. But like, for what it's worth, so would I. But the fact that Fulham are linked to Ricardo Pepi suggests to me that the hierarchy aren't completely convinced. Because there's no way you make that kind of approach for a striker like that if you're like, no, we're going to keep Muniz as number 9. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense.
But this is the problem, right? It's 2's not enough, but 3's too many when you're talking about centre forwards.
So do you need a player who's a slightly different breed, who's able to play 10 or able to play wide, in order to actually fulfill that complement? That's
what I think. And I mentioned it in the championships. I don't obviously mean him anymore, but obviously, like, I remember Brereton Diaz being almost perfect for that kind of. He's not.
But then again, if you do that, do you need another winger?
Well, I think an ideal world would be a winger that can play up front.
But that's what I mean. But is that the same player that you're bringing in that we're saying we need a 5th winger? Is that the same player you're bringing in here?
Potentially.
Because then the options change, right? Like, in terms of what you're looking for. The parameters change.
Oh, then we said that 6 wingers wasn't an impossible situation. If you had someone that can play on the wing and also do a job up front, should you get in a tight spot, both Rodrigo and Raul, or one of them is out, really. One of them being out last season was a problem.
Yeah, because there was no options.
As soon as Rodrigo was out in April, then Fulham's... I remember that being the moment where I was like, Fulham aren't reaching Europe.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I love Raul, and he will still score goals, and Fulham will win some matches, but we're not going to win as many matches.
No. I mean, look, I'm with you on the whole, should Fulham bank on Rodrigo Muniz? I just don't necessarily think the club are completely aligned on it.
Yeah. All right, well, we've managed to go through pretty much the whole squad. So, just to summarise, we think maybe a centre-back on loan if Issa Diop leaves.
Or permanently, as long as it's kind of with the idea that Luc de Fougeros gets those right loans.
Yeah. 2 defensive midfielders if Harrison Reed leaves.
Yeah, or a 6 and an 8.
6 and an 8. 1 winger.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, more if other people leave. And then we're slightly undecided about a 3rd striker.
Like a swing striker who can play another role.
So 5.
Yeah, I think so.
There we go.
That's assuming 5, assuming that Issa Diop and Harrison Reed leave.
Yes.
So it's a net plus 3.
Okay.
I think that's probably about right.
Seems sensible.
Yeah, I think we're in the right ballparks.
Yeah. All right. That'll do for the Fulhamish podcast today. We've actually managed to fill the entire time doing the kind of like squad analysis, but I've enjoyed it. This is the kind of thing that we don't get time to do in the season because normally we have to discuss like Luton at home.
Yeah, losing 2-0 to Brighton.
Yeah. But thank you very much for listening and for watching today. And thank you to everyone who has signed up to the new Fulhamish Substack. There's been an incredible amount of you sign up, getting involved in the new Telegram chat and supporting the work that we do. If you haven't signed up yet, head to the newfulhamish.co.uk website. Sign up as a subscriber. You should sign up as a free subscriber, even if you can't afford to be a paid subscriber, because you'll get all the new articles from the new website into your inbox. But if you can support the work that we do, then it is incredibly appreciated. Jack, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sammy. Always a pleasure.
And Jack and Joe Show will be back next week. Hopefully, they've got something a little bit juicier to get into. Hopefully, a decent transfer rumour here or there.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
We can hope. We can hope. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. You whites.
You whites.